Packers fans, stay up to date on all of your Packers news this season via our newsletter. You can sign up for the PackersNews.com and more Journal Sentinel newsletters by clicking on the link in the brief field of this video. Hello, Packers fans. Welcome into the Green 19 podcast from JS Online and PackersNews.com. I'm Kassidy Hill, joined as always by Tom Silverstein and Ryan Wood here in our Lambeau Field office, where we're all in varying degrees of a comatose state after a late game. Packers had a Thursday night football game in Week 4. It lost 34-20 to the Detroit Lions, moved to 2-2 overall, and figure out who their biggest rival is going to be in the NFC North this year. Arguably, Spoon, this is the fourth straight win for the Lions over the Packers. 3 of those came against the earlier iteration of this Packers team. But just kind of big picture view for your long years of covering the Packers. When was the last time you saw the Lions reel off 4 straight over the Packers, including one where they just, to quote Matt LaFleur, beat their ass?
Well, I was covering them during the streak in which they hadn't won in Wisconsin in like 24 years or 22 years or something like that, included going back to the days they used to play in Milwaukee. And then they had a 4-game winning streak in 18 and 19, but Rodgers didn't play in 3 of those 4 games. So, because he was hurt. So this is like the legit streak. And if you line those 2 teams up 9 times out of 10 yesterday, probably 10 times out of 10, the Lions win. They're just a better team. Mm-hmm. They're a more physical team. They are strong where the Packers are weak. Mm-hmm. And they're now, it's Week 4, and all kinds of goofy stuff can happen over the course of a season. Teams get better, teams get worse. But they are the class of the division. There's no question about it. And if you're Detroit and you brought 10,000 fans to Green Bay, which is just crazy, you are headed for something special. And, they better not blow this season. They got something going.
I was looking last night, when's the last time the Lions just laid one on the Packers? Because they could win games, but, it was a beat down.
In a game that mattered.
Yeah.
Because they whipped them at the end of, what year was that, 18 or not 19?
That's what I was going to say. Yeah, it was 31-0 in 2018. So I didn't have to go near this far back. And I remember that game. That 2018 season was a debacle. Obviously, Mike McCarthy got fired that season. But this was different than that because this is a team that is growing but young, and you're wondering, you're testing yourself. You're wondering where you're at. And I think what had to have been the most disheartening was, I can't tell you how many people I ran into before kickoff that, 1, know the game, 2, know the Lions. And they all said the same thing. They're going to line up and just try to take their lunch money. They're just going to try to beat them. And that's what they did. Yeah. And the Packers had to have known that it was coming. They know Elton Jenkins back the joint practices in Cincinnati. Why did he get in fight? Because he didn't want this team to have the notion of being a soft team. And there's nothing about, on the other sideline, there's nothing about Dan Campbell and those Lions that has their brand is grit and toughness. So he's going to do that to anyone anyway. But you know that the Lions came in believing that they can just beat up and bully the Packers, and that's exactly what they did. They beat up and bullied the Packers, and that has to be disheartening.
Imagine if that game happened in Detroit. The Packers had the benefit of crowd noise, the grass. That should have slowed the Lions down a little bit, and none of it slowed the Lions down. And if this game were played in Detroit, it would have been 70 to whatever.
You know what, though? There might have been more Packers fans in Ford Field if the game was played in Detroit. I feel like I've seen games over the last 10 years where there were a higher ratio of Packers fans than what we even saw last night. That was an unbelievable amount of blue. And it wasn't the whole, but it was a whole side of the stadium. Yeah. It was more blue than green and yellow. I've never seen that, and I have seen games in Ford Field that were a lot more Packers fans than what we saw last night at Lambeau Field.
I was talking to Dave Bakhtiari, from the Detroit Free Press, and he said it was like that in Kansas City too. So they know they got something special going. It kind of reminds me of the '96 Packers when everything was, there was so much buildup. They just kept building and building and building. It became really big. So I'm not saying they're that good, but they got something special going in Detroit.
Good for them. Take a second and. Good Lord, is there anything more depressing in this league than being a Lions fan over the last however? So, good for them for getting on that train because they have a good team. Now, I'm just going to ignore that you said that because you're right. But it came at the expense of the Packers last night. And so that's what the focus is. But good for Lions fans for enjoying the moment. They got a team there.
Yeah, so let's get into the Packers of it all. There's a difference between a loss and a beatdown. Falcons was a loss. It was a bad loss because of the fourth quarter. But you could walk away and look at a lot of good, too, if you're the Packers fans. And you could look at what went bad and know what needed to be fixed. Last night, you look at that game and you go, well, we know what went wrong. They just lined up, as you said, and beat us one-on-one, mano-a-mano. Let's start with the offensive line part of it. This was a quote-unquote somewhat patchwork offensive line. The Packers put David Bakhtiari on injured reserve yesterday. He will be out for minimum of 4 games. But actually, before we get into the all-offensive line part of it, let's actually talk about David Bakhtiari. Yeah. Do you expect to see him back on the field this year for the Packers in 2023?
Well, NFL Network reported that he had a scope on his knee and that he may need another operation later. I wasn't able to confirm that last night, but I assume it's true. And I would say that his season's definitely in peril. I don't think they can count on him the rest of the year. And if for some reason they get him, at the end of the year, then that's probably a bonus. But they have to just play the year like he's not going to be here. And that's just a fact. And so they got to start thinking, all right, do we put Elton Jenkins at left tackle? Do we put, can we ride with Rasheed Walker? Is Schneemann a better option? Now they have to kind of really make a decision about where they're going to go there. Because Rasheed Walker did okay, but the first 2 games, but he got knocked around last night. So did everybody else. So anyway, Bakhtiari, I don't expect him back.
By the end of the first half, every offensive lineman had given up a pressure, according to Next Gen Stats. Yeah. So, but let's go back to David Bakhtiari. I think we saw, it's so easy to look on social media and to see the lamenting from fans, and it's understandable to be like, well, what's even the point of keeping him? I think you saw last night the point of keeping him, because when he's out there, you're not worrying about left tackle. Whoever wants to take this, you can. Give me the numbers part of it. Like, why does it not make sense cap-wise to cut him? Like, it wouldn't even be worth it, right?
Well, they've already given the restructure bonus of $15 million, so he's got that money. I think you have to wonder if David Bakhtiari's career is in peril at this point. He's got a $40 million cap hit next year. He played 55 snaps against the Chicago Bears, and I talked to him in the locker room afterwards. He was jovial. He played well. He felt really good, and I just have no idea what happened from then to now. And if this is another scope, I don't know. I'm not saying one way or the other. I don't know.
What is going on in his
But you have to wonder, because he's not going to be back with the Packers next year. Not at that money.
No.
And if you're the Packers, you have to find reliability at one of the most important positions on the field. You can't continue to craft game plans around not knowing whether or not you're going to have your left tackle every single week. That's not sustainable. But if that's not sustainable for the Packers, that's not sustainable for anyone. If Aaron Rodgers comes back to the Jets next year, does he say, bring David Bakhtiari on the cheap? Maybe. But short of that, I don't – the greatest ability is availability. David Bakhtiari is awfully good when he's playing, but he's not available. And that's not a position that you can have that much uncertainty and just be wondering what's going to happen week to week. I don't know what happens next for David Bakhtiari, but you have to wonder if he's going to be able to get back.
Yeah, and even if he does, he's not playing for the Packers next year. They're they need to cut bait just like they did with Rodgers. It's just the fact of, they're a young team, and you got to move forward. And maybe he does, maybe he could go to the Jets and somehow grind out one more year. But the Packers have to move on next year.
What they were thinking is that toward the end of last year, the emergency appendectomy notwithstanding, because that could happen to anyone. I mean, it's a sick joke that it happened to David Bakhtiari with all that he's been through. That could have happened to anybody. That's a human medical thing. But that notwithstanding, they felt like his knee got into a place where he could manage it. It's not an injury, it's a condition. It has to be managed constantly. It's not going to get better. But they felt like he could manage it and stay on the field on Sundays. 55 snaps, and then they had to get shut down. He had to get shut down and put on injury reserve. And you saw last night, and you saw in Chicago, when he plays well. So young quarterback, first-time starter, protect that blind side. Just don't even have to worry about that. That was the thinking, but it lasted one game. Mm-hmm. And now everything's up in the air at that position. It's backfired.
Mm-hmm. So what does this mean for the rest of the line? Like Spoon said, you're going to have to see some guys get moved around possibly. Jordan Love was sacked 5 times last night. He had been sacked 3 times through 3 weeks coming into this game. He was sacked 5 times. There's 1 or 2 of those where you go, okay, he held on to the ball too long. But there was so many times where even on the plays where he wasn't sacked, there was just pressure coming right away. And the Lions weren't even blitzing. They were just getting home with their normal front. And so, I mean, it doesn't matter who's throwing the ball if you can't keep them upright. Yeah. And Jordan Love spent a lot of time looking up last night. And so, do you bring someone in, Spoon? How much, I guess, really of those sacks do you put on Jordan Love? How much the line and is the answer outside of this building? Because going into the season, we thought offensive line was going to have a lot of quality depth. And I think it still does, but that depth is getting tested very, very quickly.
So it's unlikely you're going to get anybody who can really help you at this point. I mean, unless you're willing to part with someone who's a decent player and you can get somebody, but who's going to give up a good left tackle? Mm-hmm. Nobody's going to give up a good left tackle. I mean, it just doesn't happen. What they have to do, I think, is in this next 10 days is try out some combinations. They have to decide what they're going to do with Zach Tom. Mm-hmm. You probably either need to put Josh Nijman in there or put Luke Tenuta, who would give you some size and power in your run game. Because right now, you got nothing going on your run game. And you could put Zach Tom at left guard. You could put him at center. When Elton Jenkins comes back, you can put Elton Jenkins at left tackle and Zach Tom at left guard. When Elton Jenkins comes back, put Tenuta at right tackle or put Nijman at right tackle. I think you got to start playing around with those because I just don't think you can win not being able to run the ball, and they can't run the ball with the group they have.
Is Josh Nijman so bad that he's not an option at this point? Like, we've seen him play good football. Yeah. Like, we've seen it. He's played a lot of football, and not all of it's been great. He's had issues. He's a much better left tackle than right tackle. He doesn't have the anchor, the strength on the right side to just maul guys and run them over. Okay. But he's played a lot of good football, so it perplexes me how he's completely fallen out of mind with this coaching staff that he's not going to see the field unless Zach Tom gets hurt at the end of the Saints game and you need him for 3 kneel downs. Like, it's really perplexing.
Yeah. I'm not down on Rasheed Walker. I still think the guy can be a pretty good player. His body needs to keep maturing. He needs to get stronger. There are times he's getting kind of pushed around a little bit, but you can tell he's an athlete. You can tell he knows how to play the left tackle position. But, maybe it helps him if Elton Jenkins is next to him. Maybe that helps as opposed to Royce Newman, who finally showed, that all his weaknesses last night. they got to play around. They got to figure it out.
Do you give Sean Ryan a chance?
Good.
Well, left
not?
guard is the issue on this offensive line right now. It's not left tackle's not the issue. It's left guard. So when I say why not put Josh Nijman out? Like Zach Tom in the meantime could probably play a pretty darn good left guard. Left guard was the hole on Thursday night.
Center was too.
Yeah, it was. Yeah, but the interior. I mean, Jordan Love is getting pressure right into his face, which. It's the first time we've seen Jordan Love get pressured, and he didn't handle it well either. He couldn't get anything going. So it's not to absolve Jordan Love, but, it's kind of the nature of offense in the NFL. Any quarterback, regardless if it's their first handful starts or they've been playing 10, 15 years, any quarterback getting internal pressure right in your face is going to have a bad night. That's recipe on defense to get any quarterback off their game, is to rush them straight ahead. The Lions were able to do that. So, yeah, the combination, they've got to fix the holes. I don't think left tackle is necessarily the hole. I'm not saying that Rasheed Walker is David Bakhtiari, but they've got to fix the holes that are there.
Getting into the run game some, there was a play last night where A.J. Dillon took the handoff. He went to find his lane, and Josh Myers I think he was supposed to pull, and he completely whiffed. Guy got through. A.J. Dillon didn't even make it back to the line of scrimmage. And so... we looked a lot at A.J. Dillon the first couple weeks, and I think justifiably so, but I think it is becoming a little bit more and more clear, or at least the past couple of weeks, the issue has been more with the line than necessarily just Dillon. That being said, you have a big back like that, you expect him to make some holes when they aren't there, and that's not happening.
David Montgomery sure did.
He absolutely did. Golly, he had over 30 carries. That's just insane.
And all physical, hard running. I mean, there were some big holes sometimes, but that guy never gets dropped for a loss. Never. I mean, his whole career, that's how it's been.
Right.
He breaks more tackles than any running back in the league.
He did have some lanes, though. This is a cliche, but there were times where you think, golly, you could drive a Mack truck through there. Yeah. Gosh, he had some lanes. But back to the Packers run game. Aaron Jones touched the ball 6 times. And early on, you look at it and you go, okay, he didn't touch the ball until, a couple of drives in. Some of that, I think, had to do with the fact that they were behind the chains. They had taken sacks. They had lost some yardage. You've got to throw yourself out of those situations. But his is still, arguably, I don't even think it's actually much up for debate. He is their most dynamic offensive playmaker. When he touches the ball 6 times, how many times can Matt LaFleur come into a post game and say, we've got to get Aaron Jones the ball more, and then not do it?
Well,
and I know he was technically on a snap count from the hamstring injury. It sounded like after the game when we all spoke to him, Ryan, that was kind of a surprise to him going into the game that he was going to be on a snap count.
Well, let's extrapolate that a little bit. The Packers had 53 plays against the Lions, and Christian Watson and Aaron Jones touched the ball on 8. And I'm not saying, I understand they're fresh off an injury, and they've been theoretically preserved for this game, really. I'm not saying you run those 2 guys in the ground. You need them over the course of the season. I understand that. But less than 20% of your plays went to your 2 best players, unquestionably, your 2 best players, the 2 guys in your offense that have the talent to change games. At some point, look what did the Lions do? They gave the ball to David Montgomery over 30 times. Amon-Ra St. Brown had a night. Offensive football is giving the football to your best players. And when your best players combine to touch the ball 8 times in 53 snaps, that's not near enough. And if those guys were that banged up and it was their medical situation was that uncertain that they couldn't do more than that, they shouldn't be out there, because then you're flirting with second injuries and a bigger problem down the road. So if those guys are healthy enough to play, you don't run them into the ground, but you have to scheme plays for your best players, and that they didn't do that.
So if it was 8 times, does that mean Watson had 2, and it was the 24-yarder down the middle and the touchdown?
And Christian Watson in the first half, when they were getting drop kicked 27-3, had 2 targets the entire first half, 0 catches. Aaron Jones didn't touch the football until they were down 24-3. The Packers come out 3 and out, and throw it 6 straight times. On their 3rd drive, they actually called a handoff to A.J. Dillon. You have to scheme your best players into the game plan. You have to go to them. And the reality is neither Christian Watson nor Aaron Jones touched the ball until they were down 24-3.
I think they were basically window dressing. I think they were out there as window dressing. I think they came out and said, let's make them active. We'll get them a few plays, but they're going to be mostly decoys. They're going to be, just ads, take some pressure off some of the other guys. But they didn't use them like they were healthy. They used them like they were hurt. And maybe it was a very cautious approach to the way they used them. And maybe it ends up paying off in the long run. They take their licks in this game and then they come back, on the Raiders and their full strength. But, you could see just the way they were taped up. Both their hamstrings were taped up pretty good. I just got the sense that it was like, okay, we'll throw them out there for a few plays, but really, everybody else is going to have to do what they've been doing anyways.
I feel like if they can't give you more than that, then it's an awfully big risk to take to have them out there anyway.
Yeah.
And I'll tell you, talking with Christian Watson after the game, and now players are going to feel this way, but he did not feel like he was window dressing. He felt like he was good to go. He felt like he was good to go against the Saints. He's been a little but he said point blank when they took him out off the field when the score got out of hand, he was upset. That's the word that he felt like he was good to go, good to do more. And, he's not a doctor, so that's what training staffs get paid to make decisions on, but that's how they felt.
I think at the end they were just like, well, why bother? It would have been stupid to have him out there every single play. But, you're right. If you make a decision to play him, then play him. If you're going to do the window dressing thing, I don't know. It's just, against the Lions, it just doesn't seem like a good idea. You're not fooling them by throwing, Jones in the backfield and then passing every single time, It just didn't work.
Well, you're not a doctor or a coach, but you did stay at a Holiday Inn Express last
Once
night.
I did, yeah.
So that was good. Watson, just a small caveat, Watson would have had a catch early on, but that turned into an interception.
Mm-hmm. He had 2
the ball
targets
was
in the
tipped.
first half. Yeah.
The ball was tipped on a pass to him, turned into an interception. That's the other thing. Jordan Love coming into this game had thrown 1 interception. He threw 2 last night. There's some you can look at a stat sheet and look at an interception and go, okay, well, that doesn't tell the whole story. That kind of tells the whole story from his passing game last night. Is it safe to say those were both just kind of bad balls, bad decisions, or was that the Lions? Which would you lean more towards? Was it good defense by the Lions, bad decision by Jordan Love, or a little bit of both?
I would say the tipped one was nice play by the Lions. It's still a little tight window, but he was open until Anzalone, did a great job of reacting to play action and just, bam, got back in the passing lane and was right there and tipped it up. So, good play by the Lions. The other one, I don't know what happened there.
I kind of feel like the second one was one of those things that just happens. Like, I don't want to absolve anyone from blame, but Jordan Love, as he reads it, he's seen an in-breaking route, and there was a window to throw it, but as Romeo Doubs is in-breaking, he sees a patch of grass in the corner end zone that's wide open. That's inexperience. You're going to have some of those balls because Romeo Doubs, you could argue, made the right route correction, and Jordan Love, I could see how he thought that's where Romeo Doubs wanted to take the route.
Well, that's what happens when you're under pressure all the time. You don't have time to see if Doubs is playing scramble rules, which is what he did. He finished his route, and then he sees Love kind of moving out. But when you're under pressure like that, that's what kind of mistakes happen, and so that's like an offensive unit breakdown, in my opinion.
Yeah. Especially when you've been getting pressured like that all night. You're probably flustered at that point.
Oh, yeah. He's expecting to get hit every single time. And then he's holding the ball because nobody's open. And what kind of struck me was, why did they go to so many double tight end formations and then run out of that or pass out of that? Because the Lions just seemed to, play whatever zone and rush 4, and then nobody was open. So I was surprised that they didn't spread them out and then try to run the ball. Go with three wides and your tight end spread out and try to run the ball that way. But they kept packing it in, and that just brought the Lions closer to the line of scrimmage, and they couldn't run the ball.
Yeah.
I'm curious. I'll be curious to see what LaFleur has to say about that.
For an offense that has seemed to be clicking when it comes to play calling, even when there has been mistakes for the first half of the Saints, last night just seemed disjointed the entire time. Yeah. The only drive they really had that looked like it was clicking was that first drive out of in the third quarter, and then the drive that was at the end of the third quarter and went into the first that ended with the quarterback draw touchdown, which was a beautiful play.
That first drive in the third quarter you mentioned, Christian Watson has a 24-yard reception, his first catch of the night. 3 plays later, Aaron Jones has a 9-yard carry, his longest of the night, and the drive ends with a 1-yard touchdown to Christian Watson, which is why you have to get the ball to your best players. I got the impression coming out, Matt LaFleur has made it very clear that he has a lot of faith and confidence and belief in Jordan Love's ability. And I think Jordan Love's done some pretty good things. And you got to remember, he just had an incredible fourth quarter against the Saints. It almost felt like Matt LaFleur was kind of saying, okay, let's take the training wheels off this kid and let's kind of play the offense through him. And I just don't know if fourth start of the season is the right time to go with that approach. He's still a young quarterback, and young quarterbacks need to be barricaded by their supporting cast, especially their best players, Christian Watson, Aaron Jones. They are who the offense needs to run through, not your young quarterback. And a lot of the success that they had in the first 3 games was kind of doing just that, is having Jordan Love be a facilitator, get the ball to the open guy, get the ball to your playmakers, and have your playmakers make plays. And it just seemed like a different approach to start when you're dropping him back 6 straight times and you're kind of playing through him.
I think people made too much out of last week's win. I don't think he played that great. I think he played well, and he hung in there just like he did Thursday night. He doesn't back down. He's not afraid. But it wasn't like he was just a gunslinger,
right.
Leading them up and down the field, making these huge plays. Half of them were pass interference calls.
Right.
I was really surprised that the sentiment was that he had just, it was almost like it was a storyline that people wanted, fans wanted, that he was going to be great. Like, this is Aaron Rodgers' moment. But I think he's just been steady, and I don't think he can carry a team right now. I think a team has to, it's a total team effort right now.
I don't even think, at least for me, the sentiment was not that he played great versus the Saints. It was that he played what he had to. He did what he had to, and it wasn't pretty at all. But, maybe other people took it different ways.
To your point, those last 3 drives against the Saints, Jordan Love's passer rating was 92. And now it was 50 the whole game before that.
Yes.
And the Saints have one of the best defenses in the NFL. And it was very impressive that he was able to just say, screw it, make a play, and not – Romeo Dobbs said it after the game. A lot of quarterbacks in that situation would have lost their mind. It's impressive that Jordan Love never lost his mind for a young guy. That is very impressive. But his passer rating those last 3 drives was 92. That's not barn burning.
Yeah, it wasn't, Tom Brady going down in the last – series of a Super Bowl or something like that. It was fine. So my point in this being is the expectation was too high going into this game, that he was going to single-handedly take them back.
I agree with that, especially with it still being so early on. Like, I don't think he's shown me anything that makes me think, oh, this kid's a bust. And I don't know if he's necessarily shown me anything that makes me think this kid's the next Tom Brady or the next Aaron Rodgers just yet. But I think there's promise, and there's a lot of things to work on.
There's talent. Mm-hmm. There's talent. Mm-hmm. The guy has talent. He's got a great arm. He's, you like the fact that he's calm in those moments. He doesn't back down. He didn't, crumble like a flower or something. He hung in there. But no one knows if he's great yet. That process has to work itself out,
Yeah. Still early, way too early on to be putting all that on his shoulders. But that's what happens when you're the quarterback of the Green Bay Packers. And, especially quarterback 1. Let's flip to the other side of the ball. Every defender I talked to in the locker room last night, I asked them this one same question, and it was interesting to get the variety of answers. Are you concerned about the weaknesses that have been exposed in this defense and that they're going to just continue to be gashed. And it was kind of like, yeah, like we've shown teams what they can do against us, and they're going to keep doing it. And that starts and ends, especially up front with the run defense. This run defense after week 1, we thought, it's going to be great, but they were playing the Chicago Bears. And even then, Justin Fields still had like 55 yards. It's such a simple concept that I feel like they're getting beat with, and it's just they're getting beat over and over and over. I mean, Spoon, do you think that the talent is there and it's the scheme, or is the scheme there and it's personnel? Is it just a little bit of everything?
The talent is there. I mean, Kenny Clark is still having a great year. TJ Slayton is, more than competent as a nose tackle. Wyatt's been up and down, but Carl Brooks played his butt off yesterday. I mean, he's trying to earn a starting spot. He's playing that well. I didn't get a chance to watch him that much in the run game because they use Wyatt more. But in the pass, rushing the passer, he gets after it. No, there's no reason. Quay Walker was, a man
everywhere.
Obsessed. He was all over the place.
Mm-hmm.
Guy finishes with 19 tackles like that. You should be winning. I thought Preston Smith played pretty well. But I don't really get why there's these huge gaps. You're going to have double team blocks, but a lot of times you looked at guys, and I noticed this watching it this morning, they're like guys looking at each other like, where were you, or what happened? Like, weren't you supposed to be here? I saw it with Savage did it to Keyshawn Nixon on a run and play. I saw Justin Hollins look up like that on the touchdown, Montgomery's first touchdown where he just walked in.
Yeah.
Preston Smith was like, what happened? And that's concerning that they're going, where are guys? So something's amiss there. Mm-hmm. And Barry's got to fix that, or he's going to be right back where he was last year when he was a candidate to be fired.
How much of that, and I don't even necessarily believe this to be true, I'm just playing devil's advocate, how much of that, because it was worse last night than it was in the first 3 weeks. It was bad in the first 3 weeks, but it was really bad last night. How much of that is a short week and not being in the meeting room maybe as much?
No, you can't blame that, because the Lions had this exact same amount,
Yeah.
It's to me it looked like the Lions scheme was awesome. Like, they pulled guys, they slanted, they had guys going in different directions. I mean, everything they did was pretty complex, it looked like to me.
Glad you said that, because it seemed like they came in and they knew exactly where to expose the Packers' weaknesses. Ryan, I know Rasul Douglas had a very interesting answer last night about one of those first plays with when Amon-Ra St. Brown kind of shook him out of his shoes. The Lions drew that up specifically for Rasul Douglas, correct?
Yeah. Well, first of all, every name you just mentioned, that's a lot of talent there. Packers defensive front, it's too good to get bullied like that.
Yeah.
And that was what was different about last night to the first 3 games. They didn't get bullied against the Falcons. They just didn't set an edge. Like, you had a great player in Bijan Robinson getting to the outside of the field, not setting an edge. That's what happens. There was nothing crafty or clever about what the Lions did schematically. They just bullied the crap out of the Packers defensive front. And that's a really talented Packers defensive front. So that just doesn't connect. There's something not connecting there. But yeah, your question, Rasul Douglas said that Jared Goff came up to him after the game and told him about that first touchdown, which was the easiest touchdown of Amon-Ra St. Brown's career, where he literally could have handed him the football and walked into the end zone because Rasul Douglas bit on the stop part of the stop and go. And Rasul Douglas said that the last 3 years, he's been watching them, in the red zone, they always run that speed breaker all the time. And rightly so. Amon-Ra St. Brown, you just give him the ball and let him make yards after the catch and make plays. But the Lions saw that on film, and Jared Goff told Rasul Douglas, according to Rasul Douglas, that they put that play, that go part of the play in this week in practice, abbreviated week or not, knowing that Rasul Douglas was going to jump on the stop. And that's what Rasul Douglas did a year ago when they played the Lions. He jumped on the stop and Jared Goff threw the ball in the dirt because it was not open. And so they knew that he was going to bite on that and bite on it hard. And when he did, Amon-Ra St. Brown takes off to the end zone, and that's why he was so wide open. So it was really clever scheming on their part in the passing game, and this Lions offense is something to reckon with.
Well, and your guy, Darnell Savage, did exactly what they keep telling him not to do, was chase interceptions. There was that pass across the middle to Josh
Hamilton?
Robinson, right?
Robinson.
Josh Robinson, where he's got the middle covered, and then he sees the short. They run someone in front to sucker him there, and Goff looks there, and then boom, here he comes for the interception, and bam, they hit something right behind him. They set up Russell Douglas early. They got Laporta on him one-on-one. They got that play on him. If you're going to play man-to-man, you get your most talented guys on him, and it's a struggle for him.
Okay, that part of it specifically I wanted to talk about too. I think you saw last night how much they need Jaire Alexander back too, because I was watching what they were doing with Rasul Douglas and Corey Ballantyne and Carrington Valentine for the few snaps he did play. It looked to me like they were asking Douglas to play the Jaire Alexander role. He was following guys a lot. He was playing a lot closer to the line than he normally does. Like I said, he was sticking with guys when they went in motion, either St. Brown or Gibbs. That's not his game. That's Jaire Alexander's game. And I feel like they were putting Jaire Alexander's game on Rasul Douglas because he's, their next corner. Like, he's their next most talented corner. I just feel like it kind of showed you need the two of them to complement each other. They can't necessarily be interchangeable. Does that make sense?
Yeah, Rasul Douglas, I've been charting this, and he has played off, I would say, 90% of the time this year. He doesn't play a lot of bump and but they'll often have one up and one back.
Right.
And it's mostly, Jaire Alexander has played back off a lot too. But yeah, Douglas, you don't want him in man press coverage a ton against really fast receivers. You got to give him some help in that situation. But they always have trouble with Amon-Ra St. Brown, and they did okay except for that one play.
Yeah.
They did pretty well on him. They just let everybody else go off.
Yeah.
Which,
Wish that one play, credit to the Lions for drawing that up. It's kind of a compliment to Douglas in a way. Like, we saw you were going to do that, or I don't know, maybe not.
What it is what you said about Darnell Savage too. It's almost like the Lions know the Packers' defensive pieces really, really well, and they know how to toy with them. Right? Rasul Douglas is going to bite hard on the stop. Darnell Savage, interception, go get it. That's it's like they watch film, they see this, they know this. It's a common opponent, it's a regular, frequent opponent, and they took the worst parts of their games and they used it against them.
We are getting ready to go to the locker room here in the next few minutes, but there is another part of this game we need to discuss, and it's special teams for a few different reasons. I'm just going to tee up all three categories or all three topics on special teams, and y'all can choose which one you take first.
You tell us a little bit too, because you wrote about it.
Okay, so let's start with Quay Walker then.
All right.
Lions were held to a field goal. It would have made it 30-17, still a two-possession game. But the field goal was nullified from a penalty. Quay Walker jumped over the line, and which you can do as long as you're not using a player as leverage. But he was flagged because he did it from 3 yards back. Apparently, if you jump, you have to be within a yard of the line of scrimmage. And he took what was considered a running start from 3 yards back. He said afterwards, he was like, it's coached often, it's coached well. That was me. He was like, that was adrenaline running, and I've got to be aware of the situation. Which, okay, I could accept that as an answer, and that's probably true. Except for the fact that there were 4 penalties on special teams last night, and that has become an ongoing narrative with these special teams units through the first 4 weeks. And it would be easy to say, oh, well, it's a young team. Those penalties are coming on guys like Dallin Levitt,
Yep.
who's supposed to, Jonathan Owens, all guys that are veterans. And you look especially at somebody like Levitt, that's a 4-pillar special teamer right there, you know? And so is that a concern? I mean, especially when you've got the highest paid special teams coordinator in the NFL, that you're continuing. You know, Keyshawn Nixon had a great return out of the end zone last night to around the 30-yard line, back to the 10-yard line because of a penalty. So, I mean,
that one was on DeGuara, too. They called it on Sims, but it was on DeGuara.
Yeah.
Another veteran.
Yeah, exactly. Mm-hmm. So, I mean, at what point do you start to go, okay, what's going on in practice that these penalties are continuing to happen? Because the penalties to me seem like coaching.
Absolutely. Yeah. Absolutely. Those guys have to know, when to let go. Every special teams guy, has that issue where, you push the envelope, but you can only push it so far. And these guys just call special teams penalties. They just are dying to call special teams penalties, the officials, I want to address the Quay Walker real quick. For the way he played, it was a dumb play, and he should know the rules. But that guy was trying to do everything he could to win the game for the Packers. I don't have any qualms with him. I mean, 19 tackles. He was trying to do everything for everybody, and what he did, he probably thought, "Oh, I'm taking off from the 1-yard line." Mm-hmm. He ran up and then took off from 1 yard out. So he probably thought he was legal, but you can't start on 1 line. Anyway, it was dumb. They weren't going to win the game. I just thought he's one guy who was like, I'm not quitting and I'm going to keep fighting till the end. And I think you have to give him credit for that, and then blame for just the dumb move. That's all.
To go back to penalties at large, 31 penalties in the first 4 games. Penalties is a reflection of coaching in football. I think it needs to be mentioned. One of the asking what's the difference with Matt LaFleur this year. One of the biggest, most visible differences is him after games. This is a guy through his first 4 seasons who was always like this. I can think of maybe one time after the, the 2021 game in Detroit where he was pretty fiery and upset.
I wanted to keep talking.
The game that didn't matter because they were 13-3 going in and already sealed the 1 seed. That was the one time I can remember him being emotional. And it's 3 straight games now that we've seen Matt LaFleur be very emotional. Not just upset, but emotional with after Atlanta, the David Bakhtiari situation, after the fourth quarter comeback, and then going after Pete Doherty last night. The way this is a young team. Young teams take on the complexion of their coach. Penalties are a reflection of, at times, playing too emotional. And I wonder if that's connected.
Yeah, and they pushed him during training camp to play with more fire. Maybe this is a negative byproduct of that. Guys, the Packers now have 9 days when we're filming this or recording this before they go to Las Vegas to face the Raiders. Going to be some questions there as well that we watch over the next few days. Jimmy Garoppolo's in concussion protocol, so we'll wait to see what happens there because that's a quarterback. You can say whatever you want about him. He's had the Packers numbers over the past couple of years, so we'll watch that. And then we will continue to watch for news about Luke Musgrave, who will most likely be in concussion protocol, Jaire Alexander, Elton Jenkins. We'll see if Aaron Jones actually gets a full padded practice under his belt for the first time since week 1, heading into this Raiders week. This mini bye could not come at a better time for the Packers. We will have full coverage for you, wrapping up the loss to the Detroit Lions, getting ready for the Monday night game against the Raiders. So stay tuned to PackersNews.com for that. Guys, thanks so much as always. This has been the Green 19 podcast from JS Online and PackersNews.com.